Hello everybody and welcome back to another report card video. It's Legion and today we are going to be going over the Empire Special Forces. This is how I rank the units. Feel free to pause at either of these to check out how I go about grading these guys. First up we have the Imperial Death Troopers coming in at 72 points at a base cost with a C+ as my report card. These guys are Discipline 1, Precise 2, Ready 1, 4 models a pop, 1 health apiece, Courage 2, Search to hit, and defend with red defense dice. Red and melee, 2 white at range 2 if you choose to do so, and then you can also just throw a black at 1 to 3. Pros about these guys is they are tough, right? You get your Mando saves, whatever you want to call them, on top of a big old gun. It's the best way to put it. Aims are on steroids. Aims you give these dudes feel extra valuable, allowing you to reroll 2 additional dice. The range 2 to 4 options, pretty solid. Even their melee options, I would argue, are pretty good. You obviously don't want to be getting things like Jedi into these guys, but another melee unit charges these guys and they don't take any wounds. They can punch back with, 5 red dice. Isn't too shabby at all. They also search to hit, so those aims just feel extra special on these dudes. They just kind of feel like a giant gun, and they can participate at all ranges until they kind of get tied up in melee. They maybe lose a little value. Cons for me, and the reason I kind of give them a C+ mostly, is Pierce and Pricey. Pierce is just kind of rough for these dudes. There's absolutely nothing they can do about it besides take a model off the board. And they are a little pricey. You definitely do feel the cost of buying these dudes. Losing models, losing value. Best thing about Death Troopers is they're kind of a direct upgrade from a Stormtrooper, very much so going along the lines of the bread and butter of the Empire, being the bread and butter faction. Very simple. I would say this is one of the more simplistic Special Forces units in the game. It's just like, hey, I do more of all the things I already did. Unfortunately, though, since we are paying more for the units, that means every unit we lose feels that much more like a loss, and with Pierce being a thing, it's just a direct line of pain for me. But I love these guys. So, one of the few erratas in this last update, the DLT 19D Trooper is now 30 points with 2 reds and a white at range 4. It's Impact 1. It's a great heavy, pretty much what you're going to be putting on most of these guys, if not all of them. Free! The E11D Grenade Launcher config and the E11D Focused Fire config. You can recover and essentially flip this to one side or the other, and then you can exhaust these to get the effect on the card. So the one on the left, obviously at range 1 to 2, you'd get Blast and Red Dice. Pretty good. I think the range 2 option on the Death Troopers is already good enough as is, but Blast is no joke right now, and Red Dice are obviously better than 2 white. But more dice means more hits, possibly. Focus Fire config is my range 1 to 4 favorite here. I love pairing this with the DLT 19 and just recover, shoot, recover, shoot, recover, shoot with Death Troopers. And then hopefully someone's giving them some aims, because it's suppressive and at range 4, that's a pretty good little shot. Then we have DTF16 at 15 points. I think this dude's pretty underrated with a black and a white dice. Nothing too scary on the offensive end, but the utility here with Compel, Krennic's keyword, after another friendly unit at range 1 to 2 rallies. If it's suppressed but not panic, it can gain a suppression to perform a free move action. That can be an extremely invaluable keyword that you just want at all times. It's also adding 2 health to the squad instead of just 1, which is also very nice. Now, you can only take this dude once, but he might be a little underrated. I just don't see him a ton, but I also understand why. 5 black dice at range 4 isn't that terrifying. So, but I don't know. I think he's pretty cool, especially for 15 points, and you're going to be running a bunch of Death Troopers, essentially. Might be a solid option to consider. ISF come up next at 68 points, giving them a B for their grade, and then their T-21 Special Forces Trooper, this gun on the right side with critical 2 at range 1 to 3 with 4 white dice, is 27 points. And yeah, it's their only upgrade, so that's why it's on this slide. But they have Infiltrate, Marksman, Reliable 1, red defense dice with 1 health a pop, 2 courage, and surging to hit. They got 1 black dice in melee, and 1 black dice in range 1 to 3. These guys are pretty cool because of Infiltrate. If you guys haven't had the opportunity to use this keyword, it allows you to deploy anywhere beyond range 3 of all enemy units, turn 0. And that's really cool because essentially you can get these dudes in places that no one else can go. Really helps with board control, really helps with objectives, really helps with flanking, positioning, all that good stuff. There's so much opportunity to be had with Infiltrate. Courage 2, don't have to go over that. Reliable 1's really nice because you already surge to hit, and with the T-21, already got critical 2, so for the most part, that is a purely defensive surge. Well, most part, all the time. Marksman is also an amazing keyword. It's really utility in a bag. You can make your hits crits if you're facing up against armor or you're shooting armor. You can see that your opponent's going to take 2 hits anyways for heavy cover or dodge or something like that. You can say, well, instead of re-rolling 2 more, you should make this one a crit. Same way the other way around. If you got a bunch of hits and you don't care about crits, you can just marksman up your misses to hits and just keep the dice pool going. I really love marksman. It's a great keyword. I will say this is a con. There's not a ton of lists that really support marksman. You know, you can aim shoot, but it really does feel like Iden makes these guys a little gimmicky at times with things like tack strike, because that's where you see the true value of marksman, is when you have like 4 aims on these dudes in a turn and your whole dice pool hits and you've got 10 crits in there and you feel like you're on top of the world. But not saying it's a bad list. I would just be very interested to see ISF outside of Iden lists and kind of see what people are doing to make them successful outside of, you know, things like tack strike and Iden giving them aims, yada yada. That's kind of why I give them a B for the most part, is because I feel like they're very much so isolated to a specific type of list. But some of the other cons they face is Pierce. No need to go over that again. Pricey. They only have one heavy option, and that one heavy option is a range 3 option. That's not the worst thing in the world, especially with Infiltrate, but things like Detachment, Scout, your opponent also having Infiltrate can really deny you a lot of board space, meaning that you may not be able to get your ISF close enough to really emphasize that range 3 gun line. Especially if your opponent has snipers, range 4 stuff, they can just kind of plink away at the ISF. And once again, every model you lose in these guys does hurt a little more just because you're paying a little more. But overall, a really good unit, but I think this one topples them just by a little bit. Inferno Squad coming in at 88 points. Okay, and this is with both of their upgrades that you have to take, which is Dell and Gideon. We'll talk more about them in a second, but Infiltrate, Marksman, Reliable 1, same old, same old. Then we have Retinue, Iden, Versio, meaning that they can get an aim or dodge. They're range 2 of her. They are 2 health a pop. There is 3 members in this squad, and they are 2 courage. They search to hit, red in melee, and 2 black dice for this 1 extra member at range 3. Dell throws 2 black dice at range 1 to 5, repair 2, capacity 1, high velocity, and lethal 1. Gideon has his 2 red dice at range 3, increases the courage by 1, and coordinates to Core Trooper. Sorry if you guys heard that big old storm outside. Jeez, that scared me. Infiltrate, Reliable, Marksman, Retinue, Courage, Surges, 2 health a pop, and cheaper than the ISF, which is honestly the biggest thing for me for these guys. Yes, they're technically 2 less models, but you also have more health somehow. And then more importantly, these guys just have a ton of utility. Okay, really cool. And they're somehow cheaper than the ISF, which I think is ironic. So I would almost argue that you could take Inferno Squad without Iden more reasonably than you could the ISF, which feels wrong, but for the most part, it's pretty cool unit through and through. It's got the same thing. I will say the dice pool's a little bit smaller, but it's also a little bit better. Cons, you have to take Dell and Gideon. This is both bad and good in a couple ways. Main reason it's bad for me is sometimes they're just better in other squads. Sometimes they're better in a Stormtrooper squad. Dell's sometimes really good in a Snowtrooper squad. Gideon, same thing. Dell can be really good just in a good old-fashioned Shore Trooper squad, Boba gun line. But if you're considering taking Inferno in the first place, you're probably not too worried about that. So 3 models as well, so you know, that can be a problem as well if these guys really disappear fastly, but I think they're just straight up better than the ISF, but the dice pool is a tiny bit smaller. So both great units in my opinion, but I think Inferno Squad is a great unit for its cost. The fact it's cheaper is what kind of sets it above the other ones for me. I do think Iden's what kind of makes them flourish with the retinue, so probably need to take her to make these guys an A-. If not, maybe more like a B+, but I'm happy with that ranking for them. We have the IRG coming in at 69 points. Nice. And a C. They have Charge, Discipline 2, Guardian 2, 2 Health a pop with 3 models, and red dice, and 2 Courage. They have 2 black dice at range 1 to 2, and a red and a black in melee. This is their 1 upgrade, which is the Electro Staff Guard, which adds 2 blacks. Let me repeat that. 2 blacks, not a red and a black, to their dice pool, because it has to. And then while defending against a melee attack, you get Immune Pierce. And that sidearm is just telling you have to use those 2 black dice and not the red-black. Bros, Guardian 2, there's a ton of versatility in that. Just a big old meat slab of a unit that can take hits for other units. Imagine your Dark Troopers are with the IRG and someone's sniping you and you're like, oh great, I gotta lose a Dark Trooper. Well, you could choose these guys instead and be just as happy. They can play that support role by doing so, which is very nice. They also have a range 2 shot, which I think is a little underrated, not too much, but it's just nice that they have it. The option's cool enough. Solid melee choice. I don't think there's anything wrong with their melee. It's nothing to faint over, but it's very cool. Cons, once again, Pierce hurts them just as much. Easily my biggest problem with them is they have no surges whatsoever, surging to hit or surging to defend, meaning that they can really just suck up their dice very badly. They can charge into something, miss a bunch. They can roll dice on defense, miss a bunch. They can Guardian, miss a bunch. They can kind of feel bad at times for their cost. They just sometimes don't feel like that elite unit. I would also say that other melee units are just better than them. And maybe this is because Guardian 2, but I put Magna Guards side by side with these dudes, and I just see Magnas kind of coming out on top more often than not. And I think that's due to a wider scope of the faction rather than just unit card beside unit card. So, forgive me for saying so, but the no surge is kind of rough. And I just think they're an average unit. I don't think there's anything wrong with them, but I don't think there's anything to write home about either. Next up, we have the Scout Troopers. We're talking about the 4-man Scout Trooper squad first, not the good old-fashioned 2-man squad. They have low profile, Scout 3, Sharpshooter 1, 1 health a pop, 2 courage, white defense dice that do surge to defend. They throw out black dice in melee and 2 black at range 1 to 2. Pros, these guys are super cheap. Scout 3, really good, help deny those infiltrates, get in good positioning, help them get up the board as quickly as possible to start using that range 2 option. Okay, Sharp 1's also really nice right now. Everybody's got cover, but taking that down by 1 whenever you can is a blessing. Cons, 2 white defense dice, can be rough. No surge to hit and range 2. I mean, all these are kind of self-explanatory. When we're talking about a white defense dice unit trying to get into range 2, that can be pretty rough. Low profile will really help them get in there with Scout 3 on top of that, but these guys can absolutely disappear, and you kind of have to ask yourself, what type of unit are we bringing? Do these guys have upgrades? Is it just the one dude? Whatever it is. But next up, we can look at the strike team, and I give these guys a B+. Heavy weapon team means you've got to take one of those upgrades, which is the sniper with 2 black dice at range 5 with Pierce 1, or the little saboteur that can essentially throw out a mine. Same keywords past that, everything else is the same. I'm pretty much talking about the sniper when I talk about the strike team being a B+. I really don't see a ton of value in bringing just the detonator squad. You can definitely do some cool stuff with it. I've seen people throw like 6 bombs on the back key position and just kind of camp it out, and I think that's cool, but there's just as much wrong with that as there is right with that. These guys can be kept safe with relative ease with 1 dude out, 1 dude in. Classic scenario where you put one out of line of sight, so you can only take 1 wound, meaning these guys essentially always have to take 2 hits. A little bit less safe now that that extra squad member, or the sniper if you will, stays out instead of replacing the old unit. Don't worry if you don't know what I'm talking about, just keep playing the way you're playing. But range 5, Pierce, low profile, Sharp 1, it's just kind of a bread and butter unit. You keep them in the back of the map and you aim and you shoot and you try to take off units off the other side. And you can usually do this if you're careful enough and use that range 5 stick well and never lose these guys. It's not always the case, and some people will hunt them down, but sometimes it's not a bad thing when it's 48 points. Cons, new wound accolation, like I said, they can definitely pop out in the open really quickly and can die. They can also miss. I'm not saying that they will always miss, but it sucks when you take an aim with a sniper team. You roll, you get a hit, you roll the other dice, and you still miss. And then you just don't get anything other than a suppression, if that. And that can feel really bad when you have 48 points of a unit just constantly doing nothing. The other thing is, even if they do everything right, we're talking 7 models off the table, or not 7, 6 models off the table at a max if we're not moving into range 2. Not saying that's bad, especially for a unit that's maybe sitting in the back of the map, but you can't really expect these guys to necessarily win the game for you. That's why I tell people snipers are just kind of an attrition unit that is slowly trying to pick away at your opponent and maybe even finish stuff off. I love these guys, and I used to hate them, and now I've slowly fell in love with them. Whether it's been on the other end of the table or my end, I really can appreciate a guy that knows how to use these sniper teams. And I think it's a really good tool to add to your bag when you're playing Legion, because every faction has snipers. These are the 2 upgrades, DLT19X Sniper, the 1-5, 2 black, high velocity Pierce 1. That high velocity keyword is so good against dodges, especially when it used to be even more prominent, but it's still just as good. Pierce 1, yeah, that's just solid. The Saboteur, I don't think there's anything wrong with him. I just wouldn't put him on over the sniper most times unless you're running a full team, then I can see it. But you can do the detonate, essentially meaning that you can blow it up after anyone's activation, and it surges to crit with blast and surge to crit. That's pretty solid. Summary, once again, welcome to the Empire. You have the bread and butter options. I don't think any of these special forces options, besides maybe the ISF and Inferno squad, are too drastic to get your head around. I feel like this is a really welcoming special forces slot in terms of the Empire and new players, or even players that are just looking for a more streamlined way of playing the game. Other cool thing is they have a little bit of everything. They've got the IRG with a bit of a support role that can also be a melee role. You've got the Death Troopers that are just a big gun. You got the Scout Troopers that are really up in your face trying to get to range 1 to 2. You've got the Snipers that are trying to sit back and plink things away. All the good stuff, right? You have a little bit of everything to choose from, and that's what I love about the Empire Special Forces. Also, some very competitive options. I may have gave some of your favorites here some lower grades, but I think there's a really good list for every single one of these special forces. Double Dark Troopers with IRG, that may be something we see way more frequently. Double Death Troopers against Dark Troopers and everything else with impact and all those dice and good saves against big dice pools, that may be something you see. We see sniper strike teams all the time. I've seen triple Scout Trooper 4-man teams with Black Suns in Empire win tournaments. Okay. What else do we have? Inferno Squad and ISF, Iden. That's been a list since the beginning of time. People play that Tag Strike card all the time and just win games in one turn. Okay, so whichever one of those you want to do, you pick the unit you like and go off that, because I think you will have fun nonetheless, which I think is a really cool feature of this faction, at least for now, right? Great for players looking to try a wide variety of strats. Like I said, if you want to try any of those strats and you are new to the game, or maybe new to the faction, or you just want to try something different, this is it. I don't think there's an easier way to get into any of those strategies, plays, all those things I just talked about. I will say this, though, there's not crazy outplay options. Because they are bread and butter, you're not going to bring a Death Trooper unit and someone's going to be like, whoa, did you just shoot me at range 4 with those dice? That's crazy. No, like, most people are going to know, and the ones that don't, they're going to figure it out very quickly. There's not a lot of I got you moments with these units. And of course, any good player can make units feel amazing even when sometimes they're mediocre. But for the most part, all these units here are just very straightforward and good. Synergies are present and allow for that deeper strategy that I'm talking about. If you are worried about that more mainstream, I don't want to say straightforward approach, but things like Iden are going to bring up Inferno Squad's value, ISF's value. You can do more strategies that way. Krennic's going to make Death Troopers do different things. Palpatine's got cool tricks with the IRG. Whatever it is, there is cool synergies in the faction present with all those special forces that elevate them. Best example is Boba Fett and his rule with respect turn. Imagine 3 snipers throwing 3 black dice instead of 2. Not the most terrifying thing in the world until you start taking 2 models off every time you shoot one of those things. So there's a lot of cool strategies in the Empire. Special Forces is a really good place to start in Empire in terms of getting some cooler units that aren't your Stormtroopers. But nonetheless, I'll catch you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Comment, like, subscribe. Tell me what you want to see. Tell me what you don't see. You guys have a great one.